Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Dan Beans. I'm your Roseville Electric Utility Director. I've been on the job just over 4.5 months. So welcome tonight to our first public integrated resource plan meeting. So I won't tell you too much about what an integrated resource plan is. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but there'll be several people talking after me that will talk to you about the details. I assume you know, but if you don't, if you get an electric bill from us, then you own us. You are an owner of this utility. And so tonight is your chance to hear our ideas and challenges for power supply. That's what integrated resource planning is all about. It's about power supply. So you'll hear about cost, you'll hear about options, you'll hear about the trade-offs, you'll hear about reliability. And so this is your chance to weigh in on that. And then, of course, we'll have a web page up and surveys that you can do. And so this is the first of 2 public meetings. We'll have this one, and then they'll explain the process more. But in a few months, in October, we'll have a second one that will bring back some scenarios that we generate from tonight. So anyway, resource planning is important. It's got a long horizon, like a lot of the decisions that will be made or at least planned out. It is a roadmap. So every specific decision from the IRP will be brought to council as far as contracts and all that. So there is more to the process, but this gives us a good roadmap and an idea. Can we meet state requirements? Can we meet customers' expectations? And so that's what this is about. So many times these, for California, actually for some of the contracts, they have to be at least 10 years long. Many times contracts are 20 or 30 years long. And in California, 20 or 30 years is like eternity when you look at the regulatory changes that happen all the time. So the decisions we make through this process, or at least the path we go down, it's very important. So it's really good that you're here. And we have a small crowd here, so we can definitely take questions and things. We'll definitely have time for that at the end as well. So with that, I'm going to have Mr. Todd White. He's the assistant director, and he's in charge of resources and power generation. And so I'm going to let him take you to the next thing. There's my slide.
All right, thanks, Dan. Yes, as Dan said, so I supervise the resource planning and power generation, so this is near and dear to my heart. I'm just going to kind of kick off the meeting talking a little bit about the agenda. So first up, safety and logistics. If there's a fire or some other natural disaster that occurs in this room during the meeting, please exit the room, go to the parking lot. It's pretty straightforward here. Restrooms are down either hall if you need them. The workshop is being recorded, so we plan on putting it up on our website as a way of, so folks who weren't able to make the meeting can view the content and gives them some context for filling out the survey that we're going to have at the end. So we're going to go through and talk about who we are as Roseville Electric Utility, some statistics. We'll keep that pretty brief. Talk about what integrated resource planning is and what it means and why we're doing it. Talk about the key elements of an IRP, and then have some ways that you can provide input to the process. So a little bit about Roseville Electric. So as Dan said, we're your community-owned electric provider. We've been serving electricity to the city of Roseville for 110 years. We have about 66,000 customers. Those are individual meters. So about most of those, almost 60,000 of those are residents of the city, and then there's a number of commercial customers as well. We're about 200 employees. The size of the utility, if you look at it in the context of the area where we serve the boundary of the city of Roseville, in context with SMUD, the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, our neighbor, who's also a municipal utility, they're about 10 times our size. So we're squarely a medium-sized municipal electric utility. The utility is governed by the 5 elected city council members of the city of Roseville. They are our governing board. And then we have an advisory board, which consists of 7 public utilities commissioners that meet on a monthly basis. We just had our meeting last night. Okay, to talk a little bit about, so as Dan mentioned, this is really about power supply, planning our future power supply. So let me talk a little bit about where we are today. Right now, we have a very diverse power supply portfolio. About a quarter of our generation or supply of power comes from hydroelectric resources. So this is the blue area here. These are all the little blue dots on the map are hydroelectric supply that consists of the federal Central Valley project, so we own a share of that. We own some jointly owned resources through the Northern California Power Agency as well. Another roughly of the 75% left, it's divided roughly half and half between renewable resources. Those are state qualified renewable resources. Large hydroelectric doesn't count, but things like geothermal, wind, solar, those all fall into that bucket. And then the rest of the portfolio is made up of natural gas and market purchases. We have 2 natural gas plants that we own here in the city of Roseville. One is the Roseville Energy Park, and the other is what we call, very creatively, Roseville Power Plant number 2. And that's actually located just north of the city in Rockland. It's a small peaking plant. The Roseville Energy Park provides, on a day like this in the summer, about half of our energy needs. So that's where we are. Where are we going? And this is really what we're here to talk about, is that the state has set a goal, or actually a mandate, by the year 2045 to have all of the electric power generated in the state to be from carbon-free resources. So that's a mix of what they call renewables, as well as large hydroelectric. So by 2045, at least 60% of our portfolio has to be eligible renewables, and the remainder can be other carbon-free sources. The main one is large hydroelectric power. So that's what really we're here to talk about, is how we get there from here. We've gone through the easy part of the transition to renewable resources, and now we're starting to get to the point where it's becoming a little more difficult to manage both reliability and affordability while making this transition. And the rest of my team will talk more about that as we go through the evening. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bill Forsyth, who is the Power Supply Manager. He has oversight over the Integrated Resource Planning project. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, so what is an integrated resource plan? So basically, at its essence, an integrated resource plan, it's a comprehensive electric plan that meets the city's goals and it meets the state's mandates. As our director, Mr. Beans, mentioned earlier, in 2016, you had the passage of SB 350, which required utilities of the size of Roseville to do an integrated resource plan at least every 5 years. So that's one of the reasons why we do it, is to meet state requirements. But more importantly, it's really good utility practice. We did an integrated resource plan in 2018. Roseville's done lots of resource plans over the years. So it's just good utility practice. And really at the end of the day, just better planning creates better decisions. As our director talked about, this is a very capital intensive industry. The decisions are very expensive, very consequential. So we put a lot of effort and a lot of thought into those decisions. So I'll back up just a little bit and go back about 4 years. So our last IRP, the 2018 IRP, the key challenges we identified in that IRP were the reliability of some of our aging infrastructure. And for example, our Roseville Power Plant 2 was in need of substantial investments to extend its life. The Roseville Energy Park, which as Todd mentioned, can provide about half of our load on a hot day, was coming up for a major milestone, a major investment to refurbish that and give that unit a lot of life. We had these state regulations, as we just discussed with SB 350. Prior to SB 350 in 2016, we had to hit 33% renewables. SB 350 took it up to 50%. Right when this IRP was going to print, the states moved the line even farther. Now it's 60%, as Todd mentioned earlier. So that's a key part of planning. How are we going to meet these new environmental regulations? We addressed that in the 2018 IRP. Another big challenge was the flexibility to meet the changing demand. As more rooftop solar has been installed in the city, it creates a lot of intermittency that our resources have to help balance. So that was a key challenge. So I don't expect you to be able to read this from a distance. The key takeaway here is this plan, we came out with an action plan. And that action plan, on the left side of the screen, that's right out of our IRP, which you can find on our website. Over on the right side of the screen, those three areas that I just spoke about, these are all the projects we did. On the reliability side, we and our partners in the assets we share with the NCPA members, we continue to make substantial investments to extend the life of those. We made a major investment by renewing our contract we have with the federal hydropower with WAPA. We extended that contract 30 years. As Todd was showing those pie charts, that's how we're going to get to that really clean portfolio. It's making investments in zero carbon resources like the federal hydropower. Roseville Power Plant 2, we identified that was a big challenge. We made all those investments. So those units, we've extended their life substantially and made them much more reliable. The Roseville Energy Park, we ended up making the A+ upgrade, and we also took it a step further. As the grid needs flexibility, we invested in some new technology for that plant that lets it move around. It's got a much higher operating range to help meet the challenges coming ahead. We purchased transmission up into the Northwest, so we tripled the amount of transmission capacity we have, which enables us to pull energy from Northwest markets down to Roseville. Demand response. We partnered with other parts of the city, with the environmental utilities, where they will go to backup generation should we have a grid emergency. So we can drop the load that Roseville's serving, that Roseville Electric serves, by about 2 megawatts. Environmental compliance. So these are all things that we took to council, all these investments. On the environmental compliance side, we invested in a new hydro resource that us and some other municipal partners that we just took over at the very end of 2021. We're currently going to the market. We're in the process of putting a plan or a RFP out to the market to go buy 10 years worth of new renewables to help us stay in compliance. On the flexibility side, us, Roseville, and our other bank partners, we joined a new market. We joined the California ISO's Energy Imbalance Market. That market helps us meet the rooftop solar variation that we see on cloudy days. Some of you may be aware, last summer, the state identified there was a grid emergency and was looking to site some generation in about 5 weeks. A project that normally would take 5 years under normal processes, they were looking to do it in 5 weeks. So Roseville, with the support of our city council, the Roseville Electric team, we made that project happen. And in making that decision to proceed with that project, we were seeking to find flexibility for the electric utility going forward. So we negotiated an opportunity to, should these generators make sense for the city of Roseville, we could buy these from the state at the end of the term to help meet these long-term flexibility challenges. These units also have the ability to burn hydrogen. So it touched a lot of boxes that while we're not making that decision for the future, we will be looking at that in this integrated resource plan. So to give you a little idea of where we are in this resource planning effort, so we've kicked this project off. We've created a framework for how we're going to address all these requirements of the state, how to meet the requirements that we've set for ourselves of maintaining reliability, affordability, yet maintaining compliance. So where we are today is looking to get some input. So we're building the infrastructure, we're doing all the research, but we'd like to get some input from our customers at things that are important to them. So we'll talk more about that, of how public can input into this process, but we're at the early stage of this effort, and we're going to be bringing to our customers, and we're going to do another public workshop towards the end of the year, where we'll present, as our director and as Todd was mentioning, we'll be presenting what we think are the various paths we could take forward to meet the needs of the city. And with that, I'll introduce Brian Shinstock. Brian is our head resource planner.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. This is an important project and process for us. So like everybody before me said, your input's valuable. We're definitely going to listen and take that into account. With that, I'll get into the material and talk about the key elements of an IRP. Really, the three things that we're looking for are reliability, affordability, and environmental compliance. These are the things that are really important to us, and we know that these are the things that are important to you as well. And just to note too, some of these have competing interests. For instance, something that might improve our reliability might be the more expensive option. So doing an IRP is important because it lays everything out on the table and helps us really assess what the best steps to move forward are. Starting with reliability, simply put, it's keeping the lights on. The grid's interconnected into zones, and the demand and the supply has to be balanced simultaneously, and that's important to provide power 24/7, 365. And really, again, it's about maintaining balance. So a good visual of that is this teeter-totter. On one side, you have the usage or demand of what customers use, and then on the other side, you have the supply. So those are all the existing resources that we have. Like we noted earlier, we're transitioning to a greener grid, so we're going to have more renewable energy, more carbon-free resources, and most likely energy storage. Those are the resources that are going to help us balance the supply. On the demand side. On the demand side, you have just how customers use electricity. That can entail energy efficiency, customer generation or rooftop solar, and new load. We know Roseville's growing, and there's a lot of new load. And these are just examples of how our load is affected. And the key thing here is there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things to look at, and it can be challenging to maintain the balance of the grid. To get into a little bit more how we use energy, apologize, this isn't the easiest to see, but this is a typical home. And the idea here is, we all have devices plugged into the outlets, and they're varying devices that draw different amount of energy. They are used at different times of the day. Some of our customers have rooftop solar and electric vehicles, and really we have to manage 66,000 customers. And we have to do that again instantaneously, and that can be a challenge. There's also a challenge how energy is produced. So every time you turn on a light, we have to adjust something on our end to make that energy possible. With the transition to greener grids, we're going to have more intermittent resources, and what that means is just resources that only produce when that fuel is available. So in the case of solar's only going to produce when the sun's out, wind's only going to produce when the wind's blowing. This is a graphic of solar output. So When the green bar is at the highest, that's when solar is producing the most. And it starts around 7 a.m. and ends around 7 p.m. And as we know, we use electricity all day long, so we have to fill in those spots with other resources and other things to provide that electricity all day long. And cloud coverage, smoke, a lot of other variables can make the spikiness happen. And again, we have to have other resources respond to provide that power when we might not get it from our intermittent resources. So when we get more of these on our grid, it's going to be more challenging. And feel free to ask questions while I go through, or wait till the end, whatever you prefer. We also have environmental challenges. We are all dealing with this. The drought. Our portfolio, we have about 25% hydro. That varies year to year, so that can be a challenge to plan for. We're in our third year of the drought, so we're getting less deliveries, so we have to find replacement power elsewhere. So that's becoming a challenge. Fires also create an issue. Depending on where the fire is, it can be located near our generator where it can't perform, or even our transmission lines, so we can't be able to move power in and out of the city. So we have to, find other means to still provide power if we don't have all of our resources available to us. Another challenge is the summer. We're a summer peaking utility. What that means is we use a lot more energy in the summer with the heat, AC loads being one of the highest consumers of energy. As summers get hotter, we're using more and more energy, and we have to be able to make sure that we have those resources that can perform under the summer and have enough to back up as our load increases. Environmental compliance. This was another one of our key elements that we're looking at. It's meeting or exceeding the state and federal requirements. Get a little bit more into that. The state and federal requirements, they have aggressive targets and they're continually changing. There's about 2,000 legislative initiatives that go to the governor each year. About 150 of those are just for the electric sector. Obviously all of those don't pass, but some do. We have a whole team that watches these that we work with to know kind of the exposure, likelihood of it happening. We have to make adjustments for these. And oftentimes there are investments in experimental technology, that we're not as familiar with, or we have to go through those growing pains with. And again, energy is something we want to provide 24/7, 365, so that can create a challenge. The chart on the right is provided by the California Air Resource Board, and what it's doing is it's showing our California's 2019 emissions. If you add up electricity, it's about 14% of that pie versus transportation, which is 41%. Electric utilities have become the state's path to reducing carbon dioxide and emissions. So that's kind of why we're having all of these bills come through and laws that we are required to meet. Affordability, that's providing services at a rate customers can afford. Again, this is a little bit hard to read, but it shows the average monthly bill for residential, commercial, and industrial customers. For Roseville, a neighboring utility, and PG&E. Roseville, we're about 10% less than our neighbor utility, who I won't name, but they are on the slide. And then PG&E, we're nearly half. So what that means is if you're within the city of Roseville, your bill is going to be half of what it is if you are at PG&E for the same house and usage. There's challenges on the affordability side too. Energy prices are very volatile. As you can see in the graph, these are just prices throughout time. You can see how they vary. It's very spiky. It's our job to level that out, flatten that out, because our rates to our customers are flat. So we really want to limit that risk and exposure. There's challenges for prescribed procurement. What I mean by that too is the transition to the greener grid. You're going to have more prescribed procurement, wind, solar, Less options generally means more expensive, and we might have, or at least a risk of stranded assets. How fast things are changing, what we're required to do, some of our assets might be stranded. And that's a huge risk on the affordability side. And then just new instruments that we have to possibly purchase, which renewable energy credits and carbon prices. So now we're not just dealing with energy price, we're dealing with renewable energy credits and carbon prices. They can add an extra about $30 per megawatt hour to the energy price. The scope of this IRP, the planning horizon, we're looking at 2023 to about 2035, so 12 years. We are looking at a couple different scenarios, and the reason for that is we know things could change. The base plan is what we normally plan for. It's the state's current zero carbon plan, so zero carbon by 2045. In addition, and this is new to this IRP, we're looking at an accelerated green plan. This is where the state speeds up their zero carbon plan by 10 years from 2045 to 2035. As Bill noted earlier, the RPS every year gets increased, so we want to look at this plan and see what steps we might have to do, the amounts, and that cost that goes along with it. We want to look at two different trajectories for our demand, one being electrification. What this means is newer technologies like electric vehicles and switching from gas to electric appliances. What happens if those accelerate quicker than we think they will? We don't have tons of history on those technologies, so it's good to look at a high-end case to know what our exposure is there. On the flip side, for customer choice, we want to look at technologies that reduce our demand. So this would be like energy efficiency and rooftop solar. What if customers adopt those quicker? This really gives us an idea and helps us make sure that we're not stranding any of our assets or building out too fast. Considerations, so to kind of summarize, again, we have our three key elements: environmental compliance, reliability, and affordability. For environmental compliance, we're looking at renewable energy and carbon-free energy. And again, those are to meet the state's mandates. Reliability, as we noted earlier, looking at retirements of our older generators. We're going to be looking at new plants with more flexibility and even refurbishment of our current plants. You know, what makes the most sense, what puts us on the best path at the least cost, and also balancing reliability and new technologies as well. Storage is the new technology a lot of people are talking about that can be part of the solution. And then affordability, the two main things we're looking at here is diversity of supply. Again, we mentioned earlier, you know, we have about 25% hydro. If we had more, we'd be in a worse situation this year. So some years it's great, some years it's a little more difficult. So we really want to make sure that we're diverse. So whatever does happen, you know, we have options. And then really what we're trying to do is we're trying to have the no regrets decision. So whatever decisions we're making today, we won't, or hopefully won't regret soon or out in the future. And just to note too, this is just a planning document. This is not procurement. That's another step. This basically is just laying everything out and seeing what our best path forward is. And then how you can help. So we are seeking input. I think it's very important to know what the customers prefer. That's why we're here today. First public meeting. We will have a next public meeting October 18th at Martha Library. And we have a dedicated website, which is posted up there, roseville.ca.us/IRP. It hosts all the information about the IRP. It will have this presentation. It'll have the materials for it. It will have the date and time of the next meeting. And it'll also have the survey. So you're more than welcome to fill that survey out online or today if you choose to. We have paper copies here. And we also have a dedicated email, electricirp@roseville.ca.us. And this is really meant for any comments, questions, concerns. Send them our way. We will get back to you. We will read them. And it's just another outlet for everybody to contact us.